When we think about justice, with courts and laws and police, it's easy to think of it as a modern invention. But what we're really tapping into is a story that's built on a foundation laid in our deepest, most distant past. It's a story not just about rules, but about something far more primal, the raw and often brutal relationship between justice, fear, and control. So let's dive into that history.
This right here, this is the key. This is the idea that's going to guide us. It suggests that to really understand our own systems of justice, we have to go back. We have to look at that fundamental human need for order and the very, very severe methods we've used for thousands of years to maintain it. So, let's go way back. Long before the first cities, before anyone had written a single word. Our ancestors, they were navigating a world that was governed by a totally different kind of code. This wasn't law as we know it. This was the raw, instinctual need for a group to survive in a very, very hostile world.
And that brings us to this idea of communal cohesion. What does that really mean? Well, for early hominids, the small group, the tribe, the band, that was everything. It was the only thing standing between you and starvation or a predator. Survival was a team sport, and it depended entirely on every single person sticking to the unwritten rules. One person stepping out of line could literally put everyone else's life at risk.
And when those rules were broken, the consequences were immediate, and they were profound. Think about it. Exile wasn't just a punishment, it was a death sentence. To be cast out alone was to be returned to that isolation that humanity had banded together to escape in the first place. Physical pain was a pretty clear deterrent, and things like social shaming or losing your share of food, that cut you off from the very group that defined who you were.
This chart really shows the huge transformation that happened in human society. As those small hunter-gatherer bands started to settle down, started farming, and eventually built cities, the whole point of the rules had to change. You weren't just trying to keep a dozen people alive anymore. You were trying to manage a massive, complex state. And that required a whole new kind of order, laying the groundwork for the first great civilizations and their legal system.
With the rise of places like Mesopotamia and Egypt, retribution wasn't just a spontaneous thing the group did anymore. It became a tool of the state. It was written down, it was formalized, and it was handed down by a central authority to govern populations bigger than anything the world had ever seen.
And you can really see that evolution here on this timeline. You go from those unwritten, prehistoric rules to around 2100 BCE, the Sumerians actually etching the first known legal codes into clay. That set the precedent. Then, a few centuries later, you get the famous Code of Hammurabi, which was incredibly detailed and introduced this idea of hierarchical eye-for-eye justice. And by 1550 BCE, ancient Egypt had developed its own unique take, where justice was a matter of cosmic, divine importance.
And this is such a fascinating point. For the Egyptians, a crime wasn't just an offense against another person or the pharaoh. It was an act against Ma'at, this divine principle of truth, order, and cosmic balance. So punishment wasn't just about your body, it had spiritual consequences. Things like being denied a proper burial. In their world, that was a fate worse than death. It meant your soul would be condemned to oblivion for all eternity.
Now, over in Mesopotamia, under Hammurabi's code, justice was, it was brutally direct. The punishment was often a symbolic mirror of the crime. As you can see, if your hand committed theft, you could lose that hand. But notice that last point. This is so important. Your social status was literally written into the law. A nobleman and a commoner could commit the same crime and receive vastly different punishments. The social hierarchy was baked right into the state's idea of justice.
Okay, so let's move forward into classical antiquity. Because in the massive Roman Empire, punishment evolves yet again. It's not just about retribution or cosmic balance anymore. It gets transformed into a carefully choreographed public performance, designed to project the absolute, inescapable power of the state. You have to remember, the Romans were master architects of empire. And they understood that to rule over millions of people, you needed more than just armies. You needed psychological dominance. The idea of Roman power had to be just as scary as its legions. So fear wasn't just some unfortunate byproduct of justice. No, it was a calculated, finely honed instrument of government.
This quote just captures the whole strategy perfectly. Crucifixion wasn't meant to be a quick death. It was designed to be a long, agonizing, and very, very public process. It was a spectacle, and it was designed to send a crystal-clear message to everyone who saw it. This is what happens when you defy Rome.
And where did this all happen? The Colosseum, the amphitheaters all across the empire.
They were more than just sports venues. They were theaters of enforcement. They were the stage where the state's ultimate power over life and death was put on a dramatic display for thousands of people, reinforcing the social order through spectacular, state-sanctioned violence.
But, the Roman way, as influential as it was just one single thread in this incredible global tapestry. To really get the full picture, we've got to widen our lens. Because all over the world, different cultures were coming up with their own unique systems of punishment that reflected their own unique values and beliefs. This table gives you a fantastic snapshot of that diversity. You had Rome, totally focused on spectacle and deterrence through public execution. But then look at feudal Japan, where justice was all tied up in a strict code of honor. Punishment there was often a form of ritualized violence meant to restore lost honor. And then, in a completely different direction, many indigenous societies in the Americas cared most about communal harmony. Their goal was often what we'd call restorative justice, to heal the community and bring the offender back into the fold, with exile being the absolute last resort.
And we have to remember, punishment wasn't always a physical assault. The psychological impact could be just as powerful, if not more so. Things like the pillory, where you'd be put on public display. That was designed to inflict humiliation, to attack your very identity and social standing. The sheer terror of being ostracized, it proved that some of the deepest wounds aren't physical at all. So after this journey through thousands of years of retribution, from a tiny prehistoric band all the way to a massive imperial stage, what does it all mean? What does this long history of cruelty and control really tell us about human society and about ourselves?
I think the single most important takeaway is this. The way a society chooses to punish is a direct reflection of its deepest values, its biggest fears, and its core beliefs. The brutality of the ancient world, it wasn't random. It was the logical result of societies struggling to impose some kind of order on what they saw as a very chaotic world.
Because when you strip away all the historical details, the motivations behind it all are timeless. The need to protect the community, to reinforce the values you share, to try and find that delicate balance between fear and justice. These are the exact same fundamental challenges that we're still grappling with today. That struggle to impose order on chaos, it's a defining part of being human.
And so, that leaves us with one final and, I think, profound question. If punishment really is a mirror, when we look at our own systems of justice today, our laws, our prisons, our endless debates about punishment versus rehabilitation, what kind of reflection are we casting? What will our methods say about us to future generations? What will they see about our values, our fears, and our own attempts to create order in our unpredictable world?